It was December 20th in the year 1957, while spending the Christmas holidays at Graceland, his newly purchased Tennessee mansion, rock and roll star Elvis Presley received his draft notice for the United States Army. With a suggestive style, one writer called him Elvis the Pelvis. A hit movie, Love Me Tender, and a string of gold records, including Heartbreak Hotel, Blue Suede Shoes, Hound Dog, and Don't Be Cruel, Presley had become a national icon and the world's first bona fide rock and roll star by the end of 1956. As the Beatles, John Lennon once famously remarked, quote, "Before Elvis, there was nothing," unquote. The following year, at the peak of his career, Presley received his draft notice for a 2-year stint in the Army. Fans sent tens of thousands of letters to the Army asking for him to be spared, but Elvis would have none of it. He received one deferment, during which he finished working on his movie King Creole, before being sworn in as an Army private in Memphis on March 24th in 1958. After basic training, which included an emergency leave to see his beloved mother Gladys before she continued her eternity in August of 1958, Presley sailed to Europe on the USS General Randall. For the next 18 months, he served in Company D, 32nd Tank Battalion, 3rd Armored Division in Friedberg, Germany, where he attained the rank of sergeant. For the rest of his service, he shared an off-base residence with his father, grandmother, and some Memphis friends. After working during the day, Presley returned home at night to host frequent parties and impromptu jam sessions. At one of these, an Army buddy of Presley's introduced him to 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu, whom Elvis would some years later marry. Meanwhile, Presley's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, continued to release singles recorded before his departure, keeping the money rolling in and his most famous client fresh in the public's mind. On December 20th in 1963, more than 2 years after the Berlin Wall was constructed by East Germany to prevent its citizens from fleeing its communist regime, nearly 4,000 West Berliners are allowed to cross into East Berlin to visit relatives. Under an agreement reached between East and West Berlin, over 170,000 passes were eventually issued to West Berlin citizens, each pass allowing a one-day visit to communist East Berlin. The day was marked by moments of poignancy and propaganda. The construction of the Berlin Wall in August of 1961 separated families and friends. Tears, laughter, and other outpourings of emotions characterized the reunions that took place as mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters met again, if only for a short time. Cold War tensions were never far removed from the scene, however. Loudspeakers in East Berlin greeted visitors with the news that they were now in the capital of the German Democratic Republic, a political division that most West Germans refused to accept. Each visitor was also given a brochure that explained that the wall was built to protect our borders against the hostile attacks of the imperialists. Decadent Western culture, including Western movies and gangster movies, were flooding into East Germany before the wall sealed off such dangerous trends. On the West Berlin side, many newspapers berated the visitors, charging that they were pawns of East German propaganda. Editorials argued that the communists would use this shameless ploy to gain West German acceptance of a permanent division of Germany. The visits and the high-powered rhetoric that surrounded them were stark reminders that the Cold War involved very human, often quite heated emotions. It was December 20th in the year 1989 that the United States invades Panama in an attempt to overthrow military dictator Manuel Noriega, who had been indicted in the United States on drug trafficking charges and was accused of suppressing democracy in Panama and endangering U.S. nationals. Noriega's Panamanian Defense Forces, PDF, were promptly crushed, forcing the dictator to seek asylum with the Vatican Nuncio in Panama City, where he surrendered on January 3rd in 1990. In 1970, Noriega, a rising figure in the Panamanian military, was recruited by the Central Intelligence Agency to assist in the U.S. struggle against the spread of communism in Central America. Noriega became involved in drug trafficking and in 1977 was removed from the CIA payroll. After the Marxist Sandinista government came to power in 1979, Noriega was brought back into the CIA fold. In 1983, he became the military dictator of Panama. Noriega supported U.S. initiatives in Central America and in turn was praised by the White House, even though a Senate committee concluded in 1983 that Panama was a major center for drug trafficking. In 1984, Noriega committed fraud in Panama's presidential election in favor of Nicolas Ardito Barletta, who became a puppet president. Still, Noriega enjoyed the continued support of the Reagan administration, which valued his aid in its efforts to overthrow Nicaragua's Sandinista government. In 1986, just months before the outbreak of the Iran-Contra affair, allegations arose concerning Noriega's history as a drug trafficker, money launderer, and CIA employee. Most shocking, however, were reports that Noriega had acted as a double agent for Cuba's intelligence agency and the Sandinistas. The U.S. government disowned Noriega, and in 1988, he was indicted by federal grand juries in Tampa and Miami on drug smuggling and money laundering charges. Tensions between Americans in the Panama Canal Zone and Noriega's Panamanian Defense Forces grew, and in 1989, the dictator annulled a presidential election that would have made Guillermo Endara president. President George H. Bush, our nation's 41st president, ordered additional U.S. troops to the Panama Canal Zone. And on December 16th, an off-duty U.S. Marine was shot at a PDF roadblock. That Marine continued his or her eternity. The next day, President Bush authorized Operation Just Cause, the U.S. invasion of Panama, to overthrow Noriega. On December 20th, 9,000 U.S. troops joined the 12,000 U.S. military personnel already in Panama and were met with scattered resistance from the PDF. By December 24th, the PDF was crushed, and the United States held most of the country. Endara was made president by U.S. forces, and he ordered the PDF dissolved. On January 3rd, Noriega was arrested by U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency agents. The U.S. invasion of Panama is responsible for the continuance of eternity of reportedly 676 human souls. The Organization of American States and the European Parliament both formally protested the invasion, which they condemned as a flagrant violation of international law. In 1992, Noriega was found guilty on 8 counts of drug trafficking, racketeering, and money laundering, marking the first time in history that a U.S. jury convicted a foreign leader of criminal charges. He was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison, but after the extradition and incarceration in Panama, continued his eternity in a Panama City hospital on May 29th in 2017. The information documented and divulged on this audio file can be verified on history.com.